Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Today we're going to take a step back from the precious metals and talk about two other quite unique and incredibly useful industrial metals, specifically nickel and copper. Now, I've mentioned in previous videos how new technologies and increased dependence on renewable energy, along with Green New Deal type policies that we will likely see implemented in the near future, will be very bullish for silver moving forward. Wind power, solar power, electric vehicles, a massive increase in electronics with the Internet of Things, the list goes on. All of these factors will lead to increased consumption of silver. But silver isn't the only metal consumed by these high-tech industries. Copper and nickel will both be needed in great quantities as we expand these industries and develop other, even more advanced technologies. And there is one specific application they will be needed for that I think could drive their prices much higher. And I'm going to tell you about that in just a minute, so stick around. Not only do I think the price of these industrial metals could move much higher in the coming decade, I'm also going to share with you a way to get exposure to their price with no downside risk. That may sound too good to be true, but it's not, although there are a few caveats. So stick around, I'll tell you all about it. It's going to be a great video. Let's get to it. Copper is similar to silver in that it is highly conductive of both electricity and heat, and the red metal is also very ductile and malleable. These properties, combined with its availability, make copper an extremely versatile industrial metal that will be in high demand as we develop a renewable energy infrastructure. Nickel is also an extremely useful industrial metal, with a variety of application. Here's a chart of nickel's various uses, and you can see that production of stainless steel currently dominates, accounting for 66% of the current consumption of nickel. But there is one application on this chart in particular that I believe will drive the price of nickel significantly higher over the next several decades, and I'll get into that in more detail in just a moment. But first, let's talk about a few of the ways that you can get exposure to copper and nickel prices as an investor. And of course, you guys know I don't provide financial advice. I'm not telling you what to do with your hard-earned money. All I'm really trying to do here is share some information that hopefully you guys find interesting. And aside from sharing my thoughts, one other reason that I make these videos is because I love when you guys comment, whether you agree with me or not. I almost like the comments that disagree with me a little bit more, because every now and then I'll read one and I think, they're right, and I change my mind about something. And being presented with some new, better information that changes how you think is really a great gift. So thank you to all of you guys who comment, and a special thanks to those of you who disagree with me and let me know it. And then some of you guys in the comments are just kooks, and if you're watching, you probably know who you are, but I love you guys too and appreciate you watching. So, how can one invest in copper and nickel? Well, here's a list of the top copper-producing mining companies courtesy of Statista. Freeport-McMoRan, BHP Billiton, Southern Copper, all of these are huge mining companies that are publicly traded. And it's likely they'll do well if the prices of these industrial metals move higher. Another interesting nickel and copper equity is Nova Royalty Corp. Precious metals investors may be familiar with royalty and streaming companies like Franco-Nevada and Silver Wheaton, but Nova Royalty Corp is a unique royalty play in that it is the only royalty company focused exclusively on copper and nickel. And if you're not familiar with royalty and streaming companies, these are businesses that provide financing for miners in exchange for future payoffs. Royalty companies receive a percentage of the revenue generated by a mine, while streaming companies receive physical metals. So Nova Royalty Corp helps to fund copper and nickel miners, and in exchange it gets a portion of their future revenue. And if metals prices move up, so will the miners' revenues, and with a portfolio of 18 royalties, Nova Royalty Corp could do quite well. But you guys know me. I'm the smart silver stacker, not the smart equities investor, and my approach to nickel and copper is much the same. I like to have my metal in physical, tangible form. So what's the best type of nickel and copper bullion? Well, you have a few choices, but I did mention at the beginning of the video that there was a way to get exposure to these metals with no downside risk. So that's going to be my preferred method, and I'm going to tell you about that here in just one moment. But first, let's take a look at some of the other options. One thing you could do to get some physical industrial metals is buy some copper bars, like this one. I won't waste too much time on this, except to say that this is probably not the best way to go. I only own this bar because I needed it for a video where I demonstrate silver and copper's diamagnetic properties with a neodymium magnet, and really only a large bar like this would work. And although they are cool and have a nice heft, these bars make terrible investments, at least at all the prices I've seen. I paid $73 for this 2 kilogram bar, which comes out to over $16 a pound. At the time, the price of copper was about $4 a pound, so you might say the premiums are a little too high. You might get one of these just as a novelty, because they are kind of fun to heft, maybe use it as a paperweight or something. But I think the market and demand for these bars for retail investors is just too small for the premiums to come down anytime soon. And the same goes for those silly 1-ounce copper rounds that have the same problem with premiums, but even more so. If you want little copper coins, there's a much better solution. Which leads us to our next option, pre-1982 copper pennies. Pennies minted today are composed mostly of zinc, with a thin copper coating, but before 1982, pennies were 95% copper. And with the recent move up in copper prices, the copper content of these pennies is valued at almost 3 times the 1 cent face value. This graphic is from coinflation.com, which is a great website you can visit to check the value of the metal content of various coins in real time. And if you guys are enjoying this video so far, please give it a quick thumbs up. Clicking that like button helps get the video out there, and I really appreciate it. Copper pennies can be rolled up and stored in these boxes, which you can get at your local bank. The boxes stack up nicely just like bars, but the great thing about copper pennies is that you can buy them at face value. Let's compare the price per pound for copper pennies compared to copper bars. A copper penny weighs 3.11 grams, and 95% of that is copper, so each one contains roughly 2.95 grams of copper. Well, a pound equals just over 453 grams. So it takes about 154 pennies to equal 1 pound of copper. So copper that you get in the form of pennies costs about $1.54 a pound. And I mentioned earlier that my 2.2 kilogram copper bar cost about $16 a pound. So now you understand why I say bullion like this is a poor investment. Now, of course, there's one glaring problem with copper pennies, and that is you have to separate them from all the zinc pennies. And the copper ones are still out there, but a lot have already been pulled out of circulation. Gresham's law at work. I know I've pulled out my share, and I'm willing to bet that many of you watching have also been doing Gresham's work. You could always buy copper pennies from someone who has already done the work of sorting them, and you'll still probably get a better price than with copper bars. Or you could invest in some penny sorting machinery. I've never gone that far, but I'm willing to admit that I have at least considered the idea. However, there is another better solution to this problem, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But first, we need to talk about some nickel bullion. All I've been going on about is copper. Now, while copper bullion is available in a variety of forms to the retail investor, pure nickel bullion products can be a little tougher to track down. While nickel bullion products like bars and rounds are out there, it's a very thinly traded market and prices may vary widely. However, if you want a pure nickel coin, Canadian nickels minted between 1955 and 1981 are composed of 99.9% nickel, and are a recognizable form of the pure metal. I've never actually bought these coins specifically. All the ones I have are from coin lots that I bought at garage sales and estate sales and the like, and just from quickly searching around on eBay, it looks like the premiums on these may be fairly high over the actual value of the metal in the coins, but it's something to keep an eye out for and still not a bad option considering the limited availability of pure nickel bullion products. Still, I wouldn't want to pay those premiums when I could just buy these nickels below spot with basically no downside risk. Yes, the fourth type of copper and nickel bullion, my preferred method to stack some industrial metals, is our very own currently circulating US 5-cent nickel coin. These guys are 75% copper, 25% nickel, and right now, today, the metal content is already worth over 5 cents per coin. So you can get a box of nickels like this from your bank for $100, and you will be holding roughly $107 worth of copper and nickel in your hands. And the best part? You don't need to sort through any coins. You don't need to pay shipping. You can readily convert as much cash as you like into nickels. And for every $100 box of nickels you buy, you're getting $107 worth of metal at today's prices. Now, let's say hypothetically, worst case scenario. What happens if the prices of the metals collapse 90% in the next couple months? Well, if you're invested in miners or royalty companies or any other type of paper derivative of copper and nickel, you're going to lose a lot. But if you're holding a big stack of nickel coins, what did you lose? Nothing. You still have your $100 because these coins are US legal tender, and they'll never go lower than their face value. It's basically like a free put option on your bullion investment, provided courtesy of Uncle Sam. And if the prices of the metals rise? Well, it's currently illegal to melt down nickels for their metal content, but that could change, and even if it doesn't, the nickels themselves contain the metal and will still rise in value accordingly. Really, I don't know why you would want to melt them down. If there was a true metal shortage and you needed them for industrial purposes, sure. But that's exactly the type of scenario where you might see a ban on melting these coins lifted. But as far as for monetary or investment purpose, these are already in the perfect form, coins. They're uniform, we know exactly how much metal they contain. They're basically an excellent form of hard money for smaller day-to-day transactions. I hear the prepper part of the stacking crowd talking about how recognizable US 90% silver coins are all the time, and that they make a great barter tool for that reason. But I'm going to go ahead and say that in terms of being recognizable, nickels have got junk silver beat. There are probably plenty of people out there who couldn't recognize the difference between, say, a silver Washington quarter and a clad Washington quarter, and who honestly know nothing about silver coins. But how many people wouldn't recognize a nickel? I mean, even the name. Most people on the street, if you ask them what metal a quarter is made out of, a lot would probably have no idea. But if you ask them what metal a nickel is made out of, well, they'll probably get that one at least half right, just based on the name. So the fact that you can't legally melt these coins down really doesn't make much difference at all. If it was illegal to melt silver coins, they would still be valuable. Same goes for any metal, nickel included. And another thing to consider is that if the prices of nickel and copper get too high, our modern nickel may be the next coin the mint stops making. We stopped making silver coins because silver got too expensive. Then we stopped making copper pennies because copper got too expensive. Will nickels be the next coin that the mint stops making? I would not be surprised if we see the composition of the nickel changed sometime in the near future. Here's an article from January of 2021 over at CoinWorld about how the mint is getting ready to implement alloy changes for some coins. And it's the penny and the nickel that are the biggest targets. That's right, the debasement of the currency has gotten so bad that even the zinc pennies cost over 1.76 cents to make, and nickels cost the mint 7.42 cents each. Here's a list of some of the newly proposed alloys. You can see the goal here is basically to reduce either the amount of copper or nickel, or both, and sub in less costly materials like zinc or iron. Now, I suspect we would have already seen a new alloy adopted if it wasn't for the fact that the mint wants to create a seamless transition, meaning that the new coins should be able to circulate along with the older ones, much like the older 95% copper pennies continue to circulate with today's zinc version. And creating a lower cost alloy that will still allow coin-operated machinery and existing coin counters to function makes the process a bit more difficult. but don't be surprised if we do see a change in our nickel coin's composition soon. And if such an event does come to pass, I for one will be glad to have stocked up on a few boxes of these nickels while I could still do so. And okay, you've probably been thinking, moving around and storing a lot of nickels is tough. Well, each $100 box like this weighs about 22 pounds, and that does add up pretty fast. So investing large quantities of cash into nickels may be logistically challenging. But for the average prepper or stacker who probably already has some kind of emergency cash on hand, why not just take a portion of that emergency fund and put it into nickels? If you have a little bit of extra space to stack some boxes, and you don't mind breaking a sweat unloading some coin boxes from the trunk of your car, then keeping some of your cash in US nickels seems like a smart way to me to get some low-risk inflation protection. But it's not just inflation that is going to drive the prices of industrial metals higher. I mentioned earlier that there was a specific industrial application that I think could drive the price of nickel much higher. I was listening to the recent episode of the Joe Rogan podcast with Elon Musk, and Elon mentioned something that I actually was not aware of up until that moment. And that is that the lithium-ion batteries in a Tesla actually only contain a trace amount of lithium. However, they contain a large amount of nickel. And on that chart of the current industrial uses of nickel, we can see that batteries currently only make up 2% of the demand for nickel. I think that number has lots of room to grow. Here's some information about electric vehicle batteries from the Nickel Institute. Quote, 2 of the most commonly used types of batteries, nickel cobalt aluminum or NCA, and nickel manganese cobalt NMC, use 80% and 33% nickel respectively. Newer formulations of NMC are also approaching 80% nickel. Most lithium-ion batteries now rely on nickel. Unquote. And here's another interesting piece of information from a report by ID Tech X titled Materials for Electric Vehicles, Electric Motors, Battery Cells and Packs, HV Cabling 2020 to 2030. Quote, several of the raw materials used in electric vehicle components have questionable mining practices or volatile supply chains, leading OEMs to change the way they make batteries and motors. A commonly used cathode material, cobalt, has famously questionable mining practices. It is also a very expensive material with its supply and mining confined to a large majority in China and the Democratic Republic of Congo. As a result, OEMs are trending toward the use of higher nickel cathode chemistries, such as NMC 622 and even NMC 811 in some new vehicles. Unquote. So, as we begin to see increasing adoption of electric vehicle technology and the reduced usage of internal combustion-powered vehicles, the demand for batteries is going to rise, and this in turn will create significant demand for nickel. As demand and consumption of nickel rises, so will its price. That's my forecast anyway. And it's not just electric vehicles. I know it can be a touchy subject for some people, but regardless of how you feel about renewable energy technology compared to traditional fossil fuels, policymakers will definitely be leaning in the green direction for the foreseeable future. And as we transition our grid to green energy, the need for battery storage on the grid is going to increase significantly. Although oil, gas, and coal plants can run pretty much any time and in any weather, solar only produces when the sun is shining. Wind power needs the wind to blow, and so on. So with renewable energy, you need the ability to store large amounts of energy during peak production times, and then distribute the energy as needed. This could even make the grid more resilient, if we utilize a decentralized storage model, such as every home being equipped with something like the Tesla Powerwall. But I'm not an engineer. I can't predict exactly how this transition will occur. But I'm fairly sure demand for batteries, and therefore nickel, will be moving up quite a bit. And if you get bored, you can always start opening these rolls and looking for some buffaloes and silver war nickels. You'll have more coin roll hunting than you know what to do with. So what do you guys think? How many of you out there already stack some nickels? I'm sure some of you must. Let me know in the comments below. And if you guys want to see an interesting property of copper demonstrated with this 2 kilogram bar and a super strong N52 neodymium magnet, then check out this video right here. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker out.